Good afternoon and welcome everybody to a special Area 51 live broadcast. My name is Jonathan Hodgson alongside my line mate Kevin Olenick for this special presentation of WHL Deadline Live here across the Area 51 platforms. Many thanks for tuning in and spending some of your Monday afternoon with us wherever you're tuned in from. It was a big day in the Western Hockey League today, trade deadline. A number of moves took place today and in the lead up to it, and we've got it all covered for you. We'll break it down, bring you some analysis and some reaction from the happenings from today's trade deadline. We're live today across Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook on all the Area 51 Sports Network platforms. So, time to kick it off. Our first block will be here for about 60 minutes or so. And time now to bring in my line mate, Kevin Olenick. Kevin, thanks so much for doing this with me today.
Wow, thanks for organizing this. It was a very interesting day in terms of trade deadlines. Maybe not so much for what happened or maybe what didn't happen. I guess that depends on your perspective and what on your team. But there's some things to talk about for sure.
Yeah, and there's some things to talk about when it pertains to some things that did happen and the things that didn't happen, as I think a lot of people around the Western Hockey League kind of anticipated a bit of a slower day today because of the unique year that it's been and the unique year that it might still continue to be. But we ended up with just six deals today, as opposed to the 19 of 2 years ago, the last time there was a regular trade deadline, if you will. Just kind of your overview thoughts, Kevin, of what did you come away with as your dominant thought from what we saw?
I think that what comes away for me is there are teams that know where they are at. I thought one of the things that Chris Millette, the head coach of the Rockets, said that was really interesting to me is they know where they stand, and him and Bruce Hamilton were talking, and this was not the year to go all in per se. And I wonder if a lot of teams were sort of in that mold, that this was not the year to go all in, but the year to, make some tweaks, get some players, improve your team, but not necessarily go all in. Because I think most around the league will tell you who the favorites are and who aren't. And again, with the uniqueness of the year and everything that has been going on with postponements and not postponement with COVID, postponement with highways. I think that teams probably thought that stability was the preferred method here, and they didn't necessarily. You don't necessarily have to make a trade deadline deal to win a championship. Sometimes the best deal is not making a deal at all. So I think that the conservativeness was very understandable today.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on, and I think a lot of teams just weren't willing to cough up some of the typical deadline day prices for a season that has a lot of uncertainty still. With the COVID situations, different, seemingly different, and all the different geographic territories around the league. Everybody hopes for the best, but I think we've learned that the best doesn't always happen during COVID. And myself spending some time the last few years not covering, but being around the Victoria Royals. One thing I look back on with this whole COVID thing, it started before we knew in the 2019-20 season. they coughed out early in the year to acquire Braden Tracy from the Moose Jaw Warriors. They got 46 games out of Tracy. It started with a bang, and they were kind of middling for the rest of his time. And then, of course, COVID comes up, and the season's halted with 5 games left. And they end up with no playoff chance with him. He goes to the NHL the following season, and they part ways with 18-year-old defenseman Nolan Jones, first round pick, and some other pieces for no playoff benefit. So that's the kind of thing I think some teams are still thinking about today. But in terms of the hockey side of things, I think there's another thing going on this year, and Kevin, I'll get your thoughts on this. There was this seemingly a small group of buyers today, and you touched on it a little bit. Everett is a clear-cut contender out west, and I think in the East you have 3 real top-end teams, 2 certainly, but there was way more sellers today than there were buyers, which could have contributed. Do you think that contributed to the difficulty in making some deals?
Yeah, I think so. I think for sure, especially when you have the 3 teams right now that are just seem so. I think most will have Winnipeg, Edmonton, Everett sort of at a level with the Winnipeg Ice when this. Remember the olden days when the CHL was ranking teams? Yes, the Winnipeg Ice was number 1 there for a while, and the Edmonton Oil Kings were up there, and the Everett Silvertips were up there pretty consistently. So we probably can put those three there, and then you have Kamloops, and Red Deer. I think probably is your second tier teams right now, and then you have your Brandons, your Saskatoons, your Kelownas, your Portlands. That group sort of in that third tier. So I think everyone sort of feels like they're slotted in a certain situation. And there's already was some pretty significant trades, like the Oil Kings acquiring Luke Prokop and Caden Gooley this year already, and giving up some significant draft capital. And it's it's just really hard to kind of make those big deals. And just I wanted to touch on something when you talked about Victoria. I wanted to bring, I also that year Kelowna was hosting the Memorial Cup, and that year that team was all set up for a championship run, or at least championship hosting. They were, the city was all set, and that's a team that never had that opportunity to compete for Memorial Cup. And I, just from a human side, I really feel for a lot of these kids that male and female players, not only hockey players, but a lot of sports that are being aged out and not able to compete in some of these tournaments and championships and leagues because of this pandemic. I think that this has been sort of one of the underlying impacts of the story. And, sports is a privilege, but it's just, I feel for people that don't have that opportunity to continue to pursue what they love to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agreed on that point. We'll go through some of what we did see today. 6 deals went down today on deadline day, and we'll run through some of them and get some thoughts and impressions from both of us as we run through things. The first deal of the day, Moose Jaw and Spokane got together. Moose Jaw gets 20-year-old forward Cordell Larson. They give up Cade Hayes and a 22 third-round pick going to Spokane. According to our reporter Liz Child, who covers, among other teams, the Spokane Chiefs, she notes that Larson is a well-regarded 20-year-old who will definitely help Moose Jaw, and is a tough one to give up for Spokane. He has 15 goals and 43 points. So he had 15 goals and 43 points in 2019 and 20. 5 goals and 17 points this year. And the Kevin, we saw, and we'll get to it in a second, but the Chiefs also gave up Luke Toporowski going to Kamloops. Just your thoughts on what we saw from Spokane today. Maybe the most serious seller that we did see today, pulling the trigger on some deals.
Yeah, they're 10-19-2. They're 5 points out of the playoffs, behind the Victoria Royals. So it looks like that they have decided to give some other players a chance, and this was a case of giving up a guy with an eye. Moose Jaw is an interesting is a sneakily interesting good team, which maybe not this year. They may not compete much this year. Well, I mean, they'll be a playoff team. I don't know how far they'll get, but next year I think the Moose Jaw Warriors will be a very, very, very interesting team. I think that they're one of those teams that are kind of hiding under the radar, and wonder if that, from Moose Jaw's perspective, that seems like that's part of that acquisition, part of their thought process. You wonder a little bit what people are thinking, and tangenting a little bit here, but I'm wondering if Moose Jaw's thought process is, what are the Pats going to do next year with Connor Bedard? Creating that seems like some for now and some for next year, while Spokane is thinking a little bit further ahead.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of the Pats, Regina was the next deal of the day. They acquire 17-year-old forward Ty Spencer from the Kamloops Blazers, and going to Kamloops is 19-year-old forward Drew Englot. Englot has 6 goals and 16 points this year for Regina, going to the Blazers now. 20 goals and 40 points in 112 games over the course of his WHL career, and I was able to catch up with Dante DeCaria, who is the play-by-play voice for the Regina Pats, and get a comment from him on his impressions and experiences with Englot in his time with Regina. And Dante told me that Drew Englot is one of the hardest working players that he's seen in his time covering junior hockey. Said he would block a shot with his face if they needed him to. Points out great work ethic, leadership qualities. Says that on the ice is a net front presence with good board play and puck control. And the Blazers made 3 deals today to bolster their forward crew with age and experience. So a definite theme for that started a theme for what the Blazers did today. Just your general thoughts, Kevin, on what the Blazers were up to today.
Well, we'll get to the significant story here, but it's here in a moment, because that's the one trade is sort of they had to make today is sort of a very unfortunate situation. But the Blazers, to me, they're a very, this guy sounds like a Blazer. Drew Englot sounds like what the Blazers want to be: hardworking, battle for all the ice, get into that fabric of the game, be a tough team to play against, sort of be what the Blazers, be that team that the Blazers have been sort of traditionally known for, but haven't been for a while. So it seems like this is a really good fit. This, from what you're describing here, Drew Englot seems like a guy that Kamloops could use. And you win championships with people that are willing to block shots with their face. I want to be clear. I'm not encouraging people to block shots with their face, but the point of it is you love players, and you love those type of guys that are the type of players that will do what it takes to win and are willing to battle. And it's not necessarily all about like the dynamic skill, you need people like Drew Englot on your team, and that's so it's a good solid acquisition. This one specifically with the Blazers. So,
and as you mentioned, their second deal was on a bit of a different note. They send forward Josh Pilar to Saskatoon to the Blades. He's been at home at Warman, Saskatchewan, which is just outside of Saskatoon, recovering from a private medical situation. And the Blazers, in their statement, said that they did make this move to enable him to stay at home and continue to recover from his private situation. And in a Twitter statement, Pilar expressed his gratitude to the Blazers for making that possible, and he hopes to return to the ice very soon. So, Kevin, on a human standpoint, which is really the only standpoint that matters with this one, it's good to see two teams coming together for the well-being of the human being in Josh Pilar, and but we do have to look on the hockey side a little bit too. He was a point per game player, just a bit better than a point per game player for Kamloops this season. And with the couple of other moves that they made today, the couple of other moves they made might have had something to do with kind of restructuring their offensive attack. Would you say?
yeah, Josh Pillars are tough to replace. He was a top six forward with them. So first of all, whatever the Pillar Josh is going through, whatever the Pillar family is going through, all the best for that, for sure. But I mean, your other moves that you're making today are not necessarily that you can replace Josh Pillar, but you're also looking at just supplanting, trying to get some of that offense that Pillar and whatever the things that Pillar brings to the table, you're trying to get some of that back. But again, it's very tough to replace a Josh Pillar for sure.
And in that deal, the Blades did send back a pair of conditional picks, a second rounder conditional in 2022 and a third rounder conditional in 2024. And the third deal of the day from the Blazers, as we alluded to earlier, they send forward Nick McCary to the Spokane Chiefs in exchange for overage forward Luke Toporowski. Toporowski has 15 goals and 29 points in 27 games so far this year for the Chiefs before the trade. On his career, 76 goals and 165 points in 223 games played. So, Kevin, again, we see the Blazers adding some goal scoring. McCary had 28 points in 34 games, but he was a little bit more of a playmaker with 7 goals and 21 helpers. So they get maybe a little bit more goal scoring in Toporowski, but and that's something that they're going to need, as they got off to a blazing start this season, and have scuffled a little bit the last few weeks, and their offensive depth has been tested a little bit. They made a pair of deals to bolster their forward group in the week leading up to the deadline. So a conscious effort by the Blazers within the last week or so, and up till today, bolstering that forward group for a stretch run.
Yeah, the for sure the it's the Blazers have they've stumbled a bit since the World Junior, since Dylan Garand and Logan Stankoven went to the juniors. They haven't gotten their footing quite back yet, and so that's interesting. And then you had the medical situation. and you had a COVID situation in Kamloops. You've also, you've had maybe 1 month where you could have your full capacity crowd at the Sandman Center. It's been kind of, I imagine, not living in Kamloops, but just imagining right now in Kamloops and Kelowna specifically, just how challenging this has been for them in terms of just trying to get your game together. You're dealing with COVID. You're dealing with private medical situations. You know, um, like with players like Garand and Stankoven for sure, and even some of the other junior guys like Pavel Novak and Kelowna. Even just wonder with the ups and downs of everything how this hasn't necessarily been easy for them. I think the Blazers will eventually get this together, but at the same time, it's with so much going on here, I think they just wanted. Hopefully, they'll get some stability and then get going.
For sure, and the final deal of the day was the Lethbridge Hurricanes.
Actually, sorry to interrupt you. There was actually 2 other trades that just came down, and one is really significant. But maybe go through that one, and then I'll add the other 2.
Yeah, for sure. The deal from the Lethbridge Hurricanes and the Medicine Hat Tigers was Corson Hopwo going to Lethbridge in exchange for Logan Berlagi, a pair of 20-year-old forwards with comparable numbers. So Lethbridge and Medhat swap a pair of overage forwards, and coming in overtime here is a couple of deals. Kevin, I'll let you break those.
So yeah, I'll start with they are 2 significant trades. But the big one here is Justin Sordiff has been traded to the Oil Kings for 2002 born forward Jacob Boucher and a pair of first-round picks, one in 2020. Make sure I have this right, 2022, and one in 2025. Sordiff was a lock for the junior team, obviously, a significant piece in Vancouver. I have to admit, somewhat surprised, but was sort of curious where Vancouver was at. As I'm just pulling up give me a second here as I pull up the standings here. This is good podcasting. I'm a professional, but they've won 2 of their last 10, and I think they are. I'm curious where they're at. In terms of what they're thinking for next year, because they made some pretty significant acquisitions. They brought in Fabian Lysell, they brought in some guys for the Giants to compete, but they're 2-7-1 in their last 10. They are now 8 points behind the Rockets for second. They're sitting in 6th place. They're a tie with the Prince George Cougars. That is that to me for the Giants, that sends to me a very, very significant message.
Yeah, I was wondering what direction they would go today, and it appeared that they were going to be one of the teams standing pat, but a couple of major moves. The biggest one was that Sordiff deal that you just went through, sending him to Edmonton, and also Vancouver sending Tanner Brown to the Winnipeg Ice for a first rounder. Just going through these quickly here, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll get into more stuff. We'll get into it deeper on the other side of a break. But there's a third deal from the Vancouver Giants that came in before those, and these are all coming in after quite a time after the deadline passed. But the first deal from Vancouver was acquiring Tom Cadieux from the Regina Pats for a 5th rounder in 2022 and a 3rd rounder in 2023. So a little bit to digest here, and there's one other trade between Lethbridge and Winnipeg. Lethbridge trades Chase Wheatcroft and a 5th rounder in 22 in exchange for Braden Edwards, a 4th rounder in 23 and a 2nd rounder in 25. So a little bit more information to chew on in real time here. Good fun. We will take a break here, run an ad, and we'll be back on the other side to keep wheeling around the BC division, the rest of the WHL, the Western Conference, and more. When we come back here on Trade Deadline Live on Area 51.
Allow me to introduce High Stick Vodka, a new way to celebrate victory. Gather around the glass with an award-winning, ultra-premium Canadian-made vodka. You probably won't listen when I say High Stick Vodka has a smooth, hard-hitting taste, or that it's developed in the birthplace of hockey. You won't listen when I say High Stick Vodka is a tribute to the game of hockey, or when I tell you it's distilled 4 times using Canada's purest mountain spring water to provide an authentic, remarkable flavor. But maybe you will listen when I say it comes in a f***ing hockey stick. Showcase your passion for hockey with our limited edition hand-blown hockey stick bottle. Whether you're celebrating victory or drinking to defeat, High Stick Vodka is better after every shot. Visit us at highstickvodka.com. It also comes in this regular bottle. Celebrate victory. Drink responsibly.
All right, we are back with live recap to the WHL on Area 51 Trade Deadline Live. I'm Kevin Olenick. Jonathan Hodgson is with us, as well as we're recapping the trades of the day and going through what has happened here to the teams. And we getting anyone else on, or is it just us two right now? We are.
It looks like we might be joined by Adam Kirsenblatt from Vancouver here in a minute to hopefully talk a little bit more in depth about those Vancouver trades that just came in during our first segment. So we're efforting to bring him on.
All right.
And if we see him pop on, we will change course a little bit, but we'll roll on as we went quite in depth in that first segment. Good conversation. So we'll go some different places here. Just very quickly to start off the second segment. A couple of BC teams that we haven't talked too much about. The Prince George Cougars were idle today. They've had a strong showing. 5-3-1-1 in their last 10, and they're kind of in a battle with Vancouver for the 6 and 7 spots, and so Vancouver getting rid of a couple of big pieces might change the dynamic of that battle. But PG is a very young team, very talented but very young, according to Mark Lamb, the head coach and GM there. They recently had 5 players ranked in the midterm rankings from NHL Central Scouting, including both of their goalies, Tyler Brennan and Ty Young. And Kevin, we'll just talk about this really quickly. One of those big moves that came down in advance of the deadline was Taylor Gauthier, the franchise goalie for the Cougars, going into the Portland Winterhawks in exchange for Jonas Bromberg, the defenseman. And that ushers in a new era for the Cougars with Tyler Brennan. But Kevin, that's a pretty exciting group in Prince George. They just look like they need a little bit more seasoning before they really find their stride.
Yep, I think that's a pretty accurate statement. They seem like they're coming along. They've And they had some really strong goaltending depth for a while. They're a young team. I think that people were sort of intrigued by them at the start of the year, but they weren't necessarily. It looked like they weren't going to be. They weren't probably middle of the pack. They are pretty much, I think, where people had them, and they just continue to grow. And that's, I look at that and I think that's good. Just take it. You don't. There's nothing for this year for the Prince George Cougars to gain and going all in. Develop your players, get assets, build this team, and then when it's time to contend, it will happen.
Yeah, Riley up front for them. Riley Height, the 16-year-old, exciting player, is 9 goals and 26 points so far this year, and Cohen Zemer, the 17-year-old, has 13 goals and 27 points. So Prince George has talent on all three parts of the ice. They just need a little bit more time, and if they can sneak into the playoffs this year and get a little bit of experience to help their players grow, I think that's going to bode well for them going forward. And the last BC team to mention today, the Victoria Royals, stand pat. They're in the 8th spot in the Western Conference. They had a darn near disastrous start at 1-11-1 and have recovered it fairly well. They have a couple of very good offensive pieces, but they struggle with trying to keep the puck out of their net with a very young defense core. Tyler Palmer in goal shows some promise, but a lot of nights he's just done in by some extremely high shot counts and high grade chances. But Kevin, one possible deal that a couple of people thought might be out there today was Bailey Peach, the 20-year-old forward for Victoria, who came over from the QMJHL this season. Leads the Western Conference in points with 47 and is 5th in the Western Hockey League. He does not go anywhere. How much of a wrench would that have thrown in things if Victoria would have elected to move on from Bailey Peach?
Well, I would imagine there would have been a lot of frustration on the island for that. It's, you talked about the Braden Tracy situation in our last segment there. Yeah, I just don't think you trade unless it's a significant return. You don't trade a guy like Bailey Peach. You build around them, and I think you're like, I mean, I'm not in Victoria, you just have to wonder where Victoria legitimately thinks themselves right now. I mean, you've got some high-end players in Braden Sherman and Bailey Peach. You're right. You need some goaltending, but you got some offense. You need to build that defense. But yeah, I just don't think you trade a Bailey Peach right now. I don't think you trade a Braden Sherman. I think again, it's sort of like Prince George, except maybe I would say that Prince George is a little bit ahead of him in the trajectory. Build, and not like it's, yeah, not sell. You being a baseball guy maybe understands this. I think sometimes, and I'm not saying that we do this in the WHL, but this is sort of a sports analogy. We assume that just the team isn't going to be successful. Just give up their assets, give up everything to try to get more assets. And there's a value to that in some ways, but there's also a value in keeping your team and growing together and having a team be successful. And to me, yeah, it just would make no sense trading a Bailey Peach at this particular point in time.
And it seems, from being an observer of theirs before I joined Area 51 as the Blazers and PG Prince George Cougars correspondent, from a few years of observing Victoria, it just to some people on the island, it feels like they're perpetually just a middling franchise where they seem to make it almost a mandate to make the playoffs at all costs every year. They've done that every year except for last year, the hub season that didn't have the playoffs, and they were last place last year, so they wouldn't have made it. But sometimes, some years, it feels like that urgency to just get in, even as an underdog or a lower seed, might come at the expense of investing those 2-3 years of time to really, from the ground up, build a championship contender. In 8 trips to the playoffs, they've never gotten past the second round. So there's kind of that philosophical debate of, do you want to try to win and get into the playoffs every year and be exciting every year, or do you want to invest that time, a little bit of pain, to build with picks and with young players to try to build a championship nucleus?
Yeah. So okay. So maybe you know this better than I do. So I'm going to ask you this question. Just what is the benefit of trading Bailey Peach?
Well, Bailey Peach right now is an overage player, and I look at Victoria's prospects chances in the playoffs for this year, and if they get in as the 8th seed, they're going to play Everett, which they look to be outmatched on in every phase of the ice. In the matchup with Everett, I'm not sure how competitive that series would be. And then after that, you look at they might get, if they get the 7th spot, they might get a Kamloops in the first round. And so I don't see a whole lot of a great chance for them to do anything significant in the playoffs. I don't think there's a run coming from them this year. And it seems to be that's the movie that plays every year in Victoria. And so sending him to one of those big 4 contenders we talked about earlier that want, or that have a legitimate aspirations of a championship this year, and getting the assets back that somebody might have been willing to part ways with, maybe that helps them build for a more solid, deep contender, maybe next year or 2 years down the road. But they didn't go that way, and a lot of sellers didn't go that way today. But just 2 different schools of thought, a lot of good arguments on both sides.
Yeah. To me, just to finish my thought on it, I don't. I understand what you're saying, and I understand the argument. I look at it. I don't think playoff games, even if you are going to lose, is a bad thing. I think that there is something that you can learn from playing an Everett or a Kamloops, and you may not have a chance to win, but playing those games is a great opportunity to learn what it takes to win.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, two good ways of looking at it for sure, and yeah, we'll see how that plays out for them as the rest of the year goes on. But I wanted to quickly go back to the Edmonton Oil Kings, as they made news just at the end of the deadline, acquiring Sordiff from the Vancouver Giants. They were active before the deadline in a couple of those big deals that happened in the days and weeks leading up. They acquired Luke Prokop earlier from the Calgary Hitmen, and they made probably the biggest deal this season, acquiring Caden Gooley, the defenseman from Prince Albert, also went to Edmonton back on December 1st for a big package. Kevin, that team in Edmonton right now, leading the Western Conference, forward group, defense core, Costa in goal. That's a unit there in Edmonton now.
Yeah, they this is the going all in now for sure type of team. Second, right behind the Winnipeg Ice, 3 points behind for first place. You've got Jake Neighbors, you got Dylan Gunther, you acquired Caden Gooley, you acquired Luke Prokop. You are certainly the Oil Kings are certainly set for a run. The one interesting question that I have, is goaltending, and I bring that up because they're looking back at the World Juniors. It turned out to be Dylan Garand and Brochure that took the first 2 games. I'm certain Casa was probably going to play, but there was some speculation and wondering if the Oil Kings were going to go in another direction in goal. So, but I think obviously they've decided that Casa is what they're going to go for. But they have set themselves up, and then just adding Justin Sordiff, Adam will tell you how impressive he is, but just from watching himself. But that's going to be a very, very difficult team to beat. Not only in the Western Hockey League, that is going to be a very difficult team if they get to the Memorial Cup.
For sure, that would be a good sight for Western Hockey League fans if they were able to have some success at the Mem Cup level, if they do, of course, make it, because historically, in recent history, the WHL reps have had a little bit of difficulty at the Memorial Cup, but they look set up to be a team to be reckoned with here down the stretch, and have their hopes set on a deep playoff run. I want to spin through the U.S. division very quickly. We made allusions to the Everett Silvertips in other notes that we've talked about. Second overall in the WHL overall standings to Winnipeg. They sent defenseman Olen Zellweger and Ronan Seeley to Canada's World Junior team. Braden Holt in goal. They're another team that's set up very, very well. And Kevin, one thing I wanted to kind of reflect on with you is the goaltending factory that the Everett Silvertips have become. Braden Holt in there now, Dustin Wolf, the Flames prospect before him, Carter Hart, the Flyers goaltender before him. How much of a luxury is that for Everett to be able to produce these top flight goalies successively?
Oh, that's huge. I mean, goaltending is the most important position in hockey, right? So if you don't have it, you can't. It's hard to win. And Everett, what they're doing there with their goaltending, that is, that's great for them, and it's also great for recruiting, because if you're a goaltender, you want to go into a place as a young goaltender, go to a place that it's going to be a place that they know goaltending, and it's very clear what you're seeing, especially from Dustin Wolf. Some can debate about where Carter Hart is right now, but I think he probably would have been, if the men's team went, he probably would have been one of the goaltenders. But you talked about Holt, Dustin Wolf. There is certainly something that they have developed there for sure.
Yeah, it's really impressive to watch. They give themselves a chance every year. You have elite goaltending, you're going to give yourself a chance to be a contender. The Seattle Thunderbirds were quiet today. They're third in the West with 44 points. They don't quite have the offensive firepower of an Everett or a Kamloops, but they have a strong 18-year-old goalie in Thomas Milic and a good decor. A couple of drafted players in Samuel Nazko from Slovakia, third-round pick of Columbus, and defenseman Tyler Bauer, a Winnipeg sixth-rounder. 4 NHL picks up front in Rybinski, Roulette, Siona, and Rempe. So that's a really talented team there in Seattle as well. That if they get hot, could do something. It's like a few years ago there was a team in Tri-Cities that they had one year that kind of had an underwhelming regular season, and they got in as a lower seed, I believe, as a wild card seed in the previous WHL playoff format, and they got hot and made a deep run. And so when you have the pedigree of talent that Seattle has this year, you can't sleep on them if they get hot come playoff time.
No, and no, for sure. It's because that, the Blazers, Thunderbirds, Winterhawks, Rockets, however that ends up, there'll be some really good matchups there. 4-5 right now would be Winterhawks, Rockets, and then but you never know what happens here. Everything could switch around here, but there's some, that's going to be some good hockey.
For sure. And we'll touch on the Portland Winterhawks again a little bit. They're set up. They did, as we talked about already, they did their big work ahead of the deadline, picking up Taylor Gauthier, the goaltender from Prince George, and they will move forward now with a goaltending tandem of Taylor Gauthier and the incumbent Dante Giannuzzi, and another team with good talent up front, and now with however it shakes out, maybe one of those two goaltenders takes the job, or maybe they end up going with a 1A, 1B tandem. But we've talked about other teams that have a clear-cut elite number one, but that can be a good thing too in Portland, having two good goaltenders that they can go to with confidence.
Yep. Yeah. Everyone's a little different on that for sure, but that will be, the Winterhawks know how to score, and they're hot right now. They've won 8 of their last 10 points, 9 of their last 10 on a 8-game unbeaten streak, a point streak, 7-0-1 in that time. So they're certainly rolling. And when they played Kelowna, their power play, they have a good power play too, and they'll take advantage of that as well. So, Portland is Portland's still it's a dangerous team. Don't take them lightly.
And just rounding out the loop in the West, Tri-City and Spokane, the two teams out of the playoff picture at this point. We've talked about what Spokane did. Tri-Cities stands pat, and our Tri-City Americans writer Jessica Mosley before the deadline commented on how the Americans have been a bit of a wild card this year. They've done a bunch of wheeling and dealing earlier in the year, but she wasn't sure what to expect. Either an all or nothing deadline, and there doesn't end up being anything from the Americans today. So we'll send it to a break here. One more break.
Can we? There is
yep.
one trade we did not talk about. We have to talk about this trade because you're wrong. The Tri-City Americans did make a trade today. They traded Mr. Goodbar to the Kelowna Road Rockets for Smarties and Hawkins Cheesies. Now, I think that the Rockets actually got the better of that deal because anything with cheesies in it, I think is just a no go. But I think so. But I think the Rockets definitely improved with acquiring a Mr. Goodbar.
You're not a cheesies guy, huh?
No, I'm not. No, not
I,
really a Smarties guy either.
I'm not a Smarties guy, but I've some time for cheesies.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But no, that was a good move by their social media department coming out with that tweet right as the deadline passed, kind of having a little bit of fun on a quiet day
Yeah.
for those teams. So that was kind of fun. So yeah, we'll send it to one more break here on WHL Trade Deadline Live on Area 51 Sports Network, and we'll be back on the other side with some final thoughts and talk a little bit about what we're doing here on the WHL on Area 51. So thanks so much for spending some time with us. We are coming back on the other side of this commercial with one more segment here. And back again for the final segment of the WHL Trade Deadline Live on Area 51. Thanks so much for tuning us in. Jonathan Hodgson and Kevin Olenick. We've taken a comprehensive look at around the WHL, what happened today, and some of the bigger moves that happened in the lead up to it. But I wanted to switch gears here a little bit in our final block, and we'll be a little bit quicker in this final segment. But I wanted to shine a light a little bit on what we're doing here at Area 51 with the WHL on A51. Kevin, I don't know what it's been like from your perspective, and you can talk a little bit about what you're doing. But we launched the WHL on A51 on December 3rd, and we already have comprehensive coverage from our team writers across the Western Conference. For myself, I've been doing the Kamloops Blazers and Prince George Cougars, following the stories that go up to the main website, area51sportsnetwork.com. Kevin, how's the last couple of months been for you?
Oh, it's been great covering the Kelowna Rockets and what they're doing. Wrote some other stuff as well about women's hockey. And we'll probably, I have some other ideas, but they're not to fruition yet, so I can't say anything. But yeah, it's been fun learning a little bit more about the league, fun working with the writers, and it's a good team.
Yeah, for sure. And the mastermind behind the whole thing, Sean Warren, the director of Area 51 Sports Network, is kind of been behind this whole thing and the idea guy. And like you said, you have some things cooking, and that might be the case for me as well. So as a team, we're working together really well. Really exciting group of people to be a part of. Look forward to more things to come, and want to shine a light on the rest of our WHL crew. We have Adam Kirsenblatt, who's covering the Vancouver Giants, and some news from Adam today, or for Adam today. He was selected as a participant in the Botchford Project this season, where I believe it's 3 aspiring writers are selected to cover a Vancouver Canucks game and have a post-game story featured on the Canucks website. A lot of great writers have gone through there, so exciting news for Adam. Congratulations to him on that, and we look forward to reading his coverage of a Canucks game coming up. We have Chris Roy in Victoria covering the Royals. We've mentioned a couple of times Liz Child doing all kinds of work for the crew, covering the Portland Winterhawks, Seattle Thunderbirds, and Spokane Chiefs. Jess Mosley covering the Tri-City Americans, and Josh Jones covering the Everett Silvertips. So quite a crew we got in here already. And just something to keep in mind is we're not done. Area 51 has plans to expand our coverage to every team in the Western Hockey League, looking to expand east at a date to be determined coming up. So if you're interested in covering an Eastern Conference team in the WHL, feel free to email Area 51 Hockey Podcast at gmail.com. That's the main network email. Or you can DM us at the Area 51 Sportsnet or WHL on a 51 Twitter account. Both of those will link you up with the team here at Area 51. So we look forward to that. And Kevin, one of the things that I'm really enjoying here at A51 is the type of stories and the type of coverage that we're coming out with. Everybody's doing a great job on the day-to-day covering of the teams, and I've had some fun with a couple of game stories and the central scouting profiles on both of my teams. And then earlier you had Liz Child doing a great personal interest story, kind of a crossover between personal interest and hockey, doing a great feature on the tradition of the teddy bear toss across the Western Hockey League. So the variety of things coming out from our team is really fun to watch.
Yeah, and it's great to have those types of stories. It's not just hockey isn't just about hockey. It's about the players and how they get there and the struggles that they get there. And Liz is especially good at being an advocate for the specific players. She Dante Janussi and other players too that she'll take a stand for, and that's great. Especially with kids, there's so much ups and downs, so much pressure, and making sure that you're doing the right thing to get on to the next level. And it's easy to just write, oh, Colton Dach scored 2 goals, but getting to know the player as well. And Liz is very good at that.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to connect, if you want to read our stuff, you can log on to area51sportsnetwork.com. There is a WHL drop-down at the top of the homepage that will take you to the WHL page on the website. Our Twitter account for the Western Hockey League coverage is at WHL on A51. The main network Twitter is Area 51 Sportsnet. And you can also find the rest of Area 51's coverage, which includes written stories on many other sports, live shows, a number of podcasts. Some of our writers here at the WHL coverage are involved in the Third Line podcast, which is under the A51 podcast network. You can find all kinds of things on the Area 51 YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook page, and there is an Instagram as well. Any questions, you can drop a DM into one of the Twitter accounts, and we'd love to hear from you and interact with you. And we'd love to have you log on and read our stories and watch the live shows, listen to the podcasts as we continue to grow the WHL on Area 51 and the rest of the A51 network. So we're going to, Kevin, if you've got some final thought or final takeaway from what we saw today during the WHL trade deadline.
Well, I think the big story today is obviously Justin Sordiff going from the Giants to the Oil Kings. That's the big deal. Very interesting from both teams. I'm sure Adam Kirsenblatt will have something to write about that. Congratulations, Adam, on getting onto the Bochford scholarship. And yeah, so, and again, I think all the best to the Pillar family and whatever Josh is going through. Hopefully hopefully they get the support they need there, and all the best in Saskatoon for him.
Absolutely. So many thanks to my line mate, Kevin Olenick, for jumping on and co-hosting with me today. Thanks to the rest of our team who've been on the ground covering their teams throughout the day as we got ready for the show. Had a little bit of a curveball thrown at us by the Vancouver Giants, but that makes it fun. Thanks to Dante DeCaria, who was good enough to share some thoughts with me, the play-by-play broadcaster with the Regina Pats. Spoke with him in the midst of a busy day for him, the play-by-play man and communications director for the Pats. And as I mentioned earlier, network director Sean Warren guiding the ship here at A51. Thanks to all for making trade deadline day a lot of fun. And we'd love you to keep in touch with us on the website, on Twitter, and all the platforms here across the A51 network. So for Kevin Olenick, I'm Jonathan Hodgson. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we will look forward to talking with you again.